Man, hey, I'm so excited to have you on the show today, Ryan. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, I appreciate your time, Curtis. Very excited to come on and talk to you and kind of share what I'm doing and what's going on, where we hope to go in 2020.
Cool. I'll start off asking you a few questions here. First off, what is your personal definition of success?
Well, that's a great question. So, personal definition of success for myself is when I am doing something that doesn't feel like work. I think that's probably the best way to put it. I've really kind of in the last 18 months stumbled on to taking my past adversity and trying to use that in a creative way moving forward. And I'll tell you really what the pinnacle for me is when I do a podcast interview and I am exhausted at the end of it, and I'm not even the one telling the story, because I had to draw out I was able to get that person to go on such an emotional roller coaster. I haven't had that feeling since I was in the Navy. I was in the Navy from 94 to 98, and I was a flight deck director. And so at a very young age, I had kind of all this responsibility, and you're moving jets around, you're doing all this stuff. A lot of the work is not glamorous by any means, but it's that kind of thrill. And I really, for 22 years, didn't have that. And so my definition is being able to be part of those types of scenarios where you're helping somebody who's going to ultimately help other people. I really love seeing people succeed. And so success to me in a nutshell is helping other people succeed.
Cool, man. I absolutely love that definition. That's great.
Yeah.
Hey, and you've gone through some pretty crazy medical issues.
Yep.
You mind sharing a little bit of that with me?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 1996, I started to notice I had some really odd things going on within my body. So at the time, I was stationed in Bremerton, Washington, which is the Puget, just in Seattle, the Puget Sound. It's where there's a lot of naval stuff going on up in that area. And the reason that time frame is so distinct for me is because our ship was in dry dock. So basically I was on an aircraft carrier. They pull your ship into like a giant bathtub, literally. They set the ship on blocks. They drain it all. It's the weirdest thing. When you see an aircraft carrier, a ship in general up that close, it really is imposing. To see them not in water is a whole nother facet. It's just odd. And so I just really remember that time frame very vividly. But I was always been somebody, as I know you have, I was really into working out, and I was getting really strong, extremely strong. And I was, 2021, I could bench press 225 pounds, 35 times. I could bench press 315, like 16, 17, 18 times. And it just was like natural. Every time I would go bench, it was more and more and more. And so I knew either I was getting really strong or somebody was slipping me steroids and I didn't know what was going on. Somebody was ejecting me in the rear end and I had no idea. So it was just this weird dynamic. So, and I was going through these kind of fits of rage. It really felt, now looking back, like I was on steroids, quite honestly. Fast forward to the fall of 1997, I went through a period of about 3 to 4 weeks where my bottom jaw actually grew out. So I went from a normal overbite to an underbite in the matter of about 3 or 4 weeks. And so that was kind of this perpetual motion of, eventually I was diagnosed in 2000 with a pituitary brain tumor. And a pituitary brain tumor was categorized for me as acromegalia. So that's the disease I have, which is basically a form of giantism. You have these freaky things that kind of happen to you. So I'm 6'4", I'm not, 8'9", but those characteristics are the same, or they are in that same family tree of diseases. And so my hands are bigger, my head got bigger, all this weird stuff. All this stuff you hear when you hear somebody that takes too many steroids, quite honestly. So I had a natural steroid running through my body. And so it caused a lot of growth hormone. That's what it is. So I went from never knowing what an IGF is all of a sudden to being an expert in all of these things that have to do with your pituitary gland. When they took the tumor out, my tumor was the size of a lemon. They actually go up through the top of your mouth. It's a very weird procedure. And they pull out the tumor that way. And then they cut out skin out of your stomach and they pack it in your nose to stop spinal fluid from coming out. And so that was the first step into this kind of journey I've had with dealing with the disease. It doesn't go away. It's very rare. And it's very rare to have the complications of it. A lot of people actually have pituitary tumors. when you pass away, and they have an autopsy done on you. Most of them though just don't manifest themselves. They're just kind of there. Excuse me. And so that was kind of the step. I had reconstructive jaw surgery. They cut out bones in the back. They pushed my jaw back. That's a whole process within itself. It's funny, you go through these things, and I really hid from it for a long time, Curtis, because it kind of changed the way I looked. And it wasn't until I figured out that it could actually work in my favor. And now I really am getting into speaking and talking about it. There's so many humorous things that go along with this. When I came out of surgery, I had a catheter. If you never had a catheter, I really just encourage you, just go have one done to see how much fun it is if you haven't, right? Well, when they tell you the tumor, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm going to stop you right there real quick.
Yeah.
That is the first terrible advice I've ever got from any
That's right.
ever.
That's what I do. I give terrible advice. Yeah. So it's. I'll tell you what, I wasn't awake when they put it in, but I sure was awake when they took it out. And that was about the most uncomfortable part of it too. So there's your catheters in for the week. But it's funny, when I was being wheeled out of actual brain surgery, I remember a couple of things. I remember my sister's voice, and I got really sick, which was a whole nother part of my story, the anesthesia. But the catheter was filling with urine, the bag, because the pituitary gland was tore out, and the bag was falling off the side of the bed. If you know what I'm saying, it was like a whole process. So, but there's things like that really are interesting to people now, and I just didn't realize it. So yeah, acromegaly is what I have. That was a long-winded way of saying, Curtis, that's kind of what I'm dealing with.
That actually, when you mention those bench numbers, that sounds like something I might be interested in.
It was freaky strong, and to the point where people would just kind of stare and go, "What is going on?" And this was before the combine was publicized. The stuff you see now is people want to know how much they bench press, and it just. I had a natural steroid. My IGF level, which is your growth hormone level, at its height.
It's like growth factor, yeah.
Exactly. At its height was almost 1900. Normal area, they want you to be between 200 and 400. And I was off the charts. And so, the way I was diagnosed was very weird. But had I not been, eventually that tumor is going to explode. Yeah. It's funny. You hear guys, they just clamor over the fact of just get any type of growth hormone. Or where do you get it? How can I have more than I know what to do with. Yeah. I'm trying to block what I have. So it's just a weird dynamic, but yeah.
That's a funny thing with, part of my history. I owned a cosmetic medical laser franchise and a white label compounding pharmacy, right, where we'd have IGF-1, LONGR 3, regulated mechanical growth factor, growth hormone, different things manufactured that people were ordering, professional athletes were ordering because it was untraceable hormones that, they're peptide hormones that work similar to the growth hormone without the side effects and without being able to be tested. So that's when you're mentioning the amount of IGF you had running through your system, I was thinking, wow, that would be you don't ever talk to a pro bodybuilder that does that kind of those kind of levels. So
it's scary. And it really, the thing is, it's like you wake up every day and you just got done working out. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that's how it was. I mean, I was kind of a freak show in the gym. There was people who were stronger. Don't get me wrong. But it's how I looked. It's just you kind of had to see it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I wasn't running marathons by any means. My job was to move weight, and so I was one of the. Again, at the time, I didn't realize I was using it to my advantage. I had no idea. It was like, I didn't take steroids. I didn't do any of that stuff. I don't even like taking aspirin now. I'm on so many drugs now because of what I have. But, it's just, it was my lucky number was drawn to get the disease, and that's how it worked.
Wow. That's, that's funny. A lot of the guys that are taking illegal injectable steroids or growth hormone and things like that, probably jealous of you in the gym there.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, I would have people come to me all the time and say, what do you eat? I'm like, dude, I eat whatever. And by the way, when I get done working out, I'm going out and smoking a pack of cigarettes, and I'll probably drink beer too. I mean, it's like the nutrition part of it, that didn't exist, dude. I didn't care. That wasn't part of it. You guys, you know what I mean? So I was doing everything that everybody else wasn't trying to. I didn't take any supplement. Oh, here's a great part of it too. Like, So I'm going to take creatine. In the summer of 1998, Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa had this baseball home run competition going on, if you recall, right? So I was in the Persian Gulf for almost all of it. So we would get a feed through CNN or whatever channel on our ship a day or two after. So we were watching this home run contest the whole way through. Well, during that time is when Mark McGuire got really big, and he was taking creatine. That was a big thing then. So I bought creatine, and it was making me sick. So when you compound creatine on top of an IGF level that's enough steroids to kill a horse, it was shutting me down. So I didn't take any of that. It was just all natural. And looking back on it now, I'm pretty lucky that nothing else really happened. The jaw thing really affected me. It just really changed the way I look. It changed the way I look from a standpoint of when I went in. The pictures I have in 1994 versus 1998, I look like two different people. And you can see that on my website. If you go to ryanwest.live, I have those pictures, and it doesn't even look like the same person.
Did you end up with a distended abdomen and the other features that doesn't look like you got
a little bit? Yeah, I did a little bit. Yeah, I mean, my head size got bigger. I mean, that was the weird thing too. So by the summer of 98 is really a biggie, because when I was on a flight deck, you had to wear a cranial, and I constantly was like, what the hell? Is somebody coming to my cranial and making it smaller when I'm sleeping? What is going on? There was constantly moving with my head, and I was really tired that summer. When you work on a flight deck in the Navy, you don't get any sleep. You're there to do one thing. You're there to be up at, when they tell you to get up and you're going to bed, you're not getting that much sleep. You're doing flight ops continuously. And so it really kind of sucks. But I was really tired. I mean, you're going to be tired, but something was off. Now looking back on it, here's another weird thing. So we had a crew that was on there from naval training, and they were doing a test with looking at having ice packs in our vests when we were in the Persian Gulf, because it's really hot. You got to wear all this clothing because if there's fires. And so they kind of inject you with this thermometer to test all your readings. Well, my readings were off the charts, just completely odd. And it was because I had all these other things going on in my body, and they were just enamored with my scores and what my body was doing in the heat. And well, I'm lucky I didn't die. Looking back on it, it's really because I had so many other things going on that were flooding my system.
Yeah. That's pretty crazy. And you've turned that into an awesome podcast and a thing that where now you're bringing other people on. You had me on earlier with interviewing folks that have gone through their medical issues and turned that into a huge thing where you're motivating and inspiring other people. And so you want to share a little bit about your podcast?
Absolutely. So our podcast, absolutely. So my podcast is called Revealing Healing Motivational Stories. And I apologize, my background's always way cooler than this. My Wi-Fi is just not cooperating today, so I apologize. But that's where we do the podcast. So the premise came from, I have to go to the doctor pretty regular, all the time, quite honestly. And, like I was talking about, I really kind of hid from acromegaly. I wasn't on social media at all up until this year. Actually, still this year in January, February. I just kind of did my own thing. And it took me a long time to really get over how I looked. And this funny thing, two things happened. I go to the doctor all the time, and I was in the waiting room, and I'm endocrinologist, and I'm like, I would love to interview people who have what I have. Let's get all the freak shows together and let's just interview let me interview them, right? And then it turned into, well, I'll just interview people who had brain tumors, because we can talk, right? I don't know. We both we'll go toe to toe on stuff. And then it was like, okay, I'll just interview people who have had motivating health stories. And that's what it morphed into. We went live this year, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting we're not in 2020 quite yet, but we went live with the first episode. I was lucky enough to get Montel Williams, who came on and talked about his MS. And it's been a free-for-all ever since. We've talked about everything from MS to abuse, to suicide attempts, to cancer, to people having their legs blown off in Iraq. You name it, we've covered a lot of it. And it's been really cool because, and Curtis came on just before we're doing this one. And that's what I was talking to you, when you asked Curtis, what is the definition of success? It's getting people on to share these stories. Because they're so phenomenal what people are able to do. You're a great example when the release is just, where did all that come from? How did you find the will to get through that, to power through it? And I'm just fascinated by the techniques and the therapies that people use. Some of it's based on their childhood, I've noticed. Some of it's based on just who they are. And it's really, it's allowing me to put together a collection of amazing stories and amazing insight. And at some point, I really want to share that more. It's one of those things where people come on. I think sometimes we get guests on, and they're a little nervous, because we're trying to get people on who don't get a voice all the time, but they have crazy stories. And they'll be a little nervous. Well, I don't know if I really want to share this, or I don't know if I really want to talk about it. And then they tell their story, and you can see the light bulb go off on their head. It's like, oh my God, this was awesome. Like I just shared stuff I've never shared with anybody. So it's a great podcast. Again, it's Revealing Healing Motivational Health Stories. We release 2 podcast episodes a week, and we have a huge 2020 coming in, including with yours truly, Curtis McCoy. So we're very excited about getting yours out there too.
Thanks so much. And there'll be a link to your podcast in the bottom of your show notes on this page. I just think that's so cool that you've turned that negative into such a, like you said, giving somebody a voice that's never had the ability to share it.
Well, here's the thing too, Curtis, and this is something that we'll be releasing into 2020. So I'm creating this platform called Adversity University, and it's a way to draw people out who have been through tremendous adversity, get them into a structure to show them everything they've learned and how they can use that to do these other things. Whether it's through podcasting or speaking or creating apps. Here's how I look at it. It's in this terms, okay? If you look at a river that a wild animal has to cross to get to the other side, in between in that river is the adversity. They got to get through the waves, the current, other animals, whatever. So they focus so hard just to get to the other side of the river that when they get to the other side, huge accomplishment. But in my opinion, that's only the first step in the journey. Now you owe it to yourself to take all that you learned to get through that river and carry it forward. And that's really what we want to try to do. I think people just don't or are paralyzed from moving forward with what they just learned. And that's really what we try to draw out. I think you get superhuman powers. We talked about it earlier with you. You were able to do these amazing things. You were doing these amazing things before, but some people it takes longer than others. Some never get them. And so we want to try to draw that out for more people. We're in this age of all of this media and opportunity. And I think that people who have suffered need to realize that they have some skills that can allow them to do more.
And what you're doing there with, like you said, people that have never been on a podcast or never been comfortable sharing their story.
Right.
That's so cool that I'm sure a lot of folks, once they get done sharing that story the first time, are going, wow, there's somebody's interested in that. And also they could turn that into a platform.
Yeah. Dude, we get it all the time. And that's where the kind of Adversity University started. I'll have people reach back up, hey, how do I get into doing this or speaking? And these are people who were terrified to come on the show. Here's the other thing. We've had some pretty famous guests on the show as well. I'm telling you right now, they've told their story so many times. It's these people you get on who've never shared it, and they've never shared some of this with anybody. You're like, oh, we had Keena Hart came on at the end of this year. She had a 2-parter. She had her arm tore off in Alaska working a summer job. Just amazing story. Now she's a really big motivational speaker, but even she was telling stuff in the podcast that she'd never told anybody. And it's very emotional. Even people break down in them. And you're absolutely right. I love being able to give people the opportunity because I'm getting an opportunity to talk to you on your show. You're somebody who's been doing it longer than me. So I think that means a lot to people when they get that shot. And there's a ton of people out there who just need to be pushed a little bit and they can be very successful.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I appreciate you doing that. Those couple of questions, I added about 20 minutes worth of questions that I didn't expect to ask you, but as we were chatting, I was just blown away by what you've done with that. What could have been an affliction.
That's great. I'm glad you were able to do that.
Now, what steps do you take daily to improve?
Yeah, so organization's a big one for me. I read. The biggest thing for me right now is not crossing off the goals that I've set for myself. I'm a big person. I'm a big believer in staying within the day and not looking too far out. I realize you got to forecast, you got to set these goals, but I follow and read a lot of stuff on Navy SEALs because I like the mindset of it. And, how does somebody really get through that training and what do they do? And what I've really come to find with most of them, and I had Bud Adams on, who was a Navy SEAL, and he wrote the book 6 Days of Hell. It's about Hell Week, and he described that a lot of the reason the SEALs make it through is because of their background. They didn't grow up with much, or they had a lot of a misfortune early on, and so they knew how to deal with it, which I think is key. But they also stayed within the moment. They didn't look too far ahead. They didn't look back. They just focused on where they were. And so for me, that's really how I try to improve myself every day. You attack every evolution as it comes. When you get turned away to have to do other stuff, you come back. You just continually are knocking those tasks off to get done too. So that's a biggie for me.
Okay, I love that. I was recently able to interview for a chapter in one of the books. Jeff Wilbig, who is Navy SEAL Team 5, SEAL Team 7, number 1 sniper. For all of special forces, pretty awesome. But it's the same type of thing like you were thinking. He talks about being in the moment and focusing on not the next hour, but the next second or the next 3 seconds, and trying to force through that next minute. So.
Yeah, and I think that the thing, especially with that's cool. First of all, is I think people think of that and they're like, well, yeah, but I'm not in the military, I'm not in combat, and that's exactly the point you're missing. That you can relate this to real life stuff, especially entrepreneurs and business owners. I mean, that's what they're doing to a certain extent. Some of them maybe not even realize they're doing it, but you have so many things just personally as getting into this entrepreneur thing over the last 12 to 18 months is. You have to be that way, and you have to continually train yourself to be even more focused. It's a real technique, and I think once you master that, you're able to master a lot of stuff in a quicker thing. The other part is, and you kind of touched on this, Curtis, in our interview, but I think one of the things I always am trying to do is I want to learn something new every week, and I really am a big believer in problem solving quickly and under duress, pressure. And so I'm a huge believer in if you have that set of skills, that helps you in a lot of other fronts. And so sometimes you got to put yourself through that as in practice, but sometimes you're going to come through those things, and you got to constantly evaluate what you're doing and what you can improve on.
Okay. That's great advice also. What is your advice for someone making an important decision?
Yeah, I think think things through. But once you make the decision, don't look back. I think one of the things I did for a long time was worried about what I didn't do right, and I worried about what I wasn't going to do right. And so again, this kind of, I don't want it to sound like the same answer as before, but think things through, and don't be afraid to try different things. There are so many opportunities out there right now outside of your normal career that I think with technology and social media and all these things, they're not this thing that you need a 7-year degree for. You just got to focus and find the time to work through them. And I believe that there's just so many opportunities out there for people to really kind of make a mark in an area they never thought they were capable of doing if they're not afraid to try it. Here's the other thing too. I think we'll see more and more. I think the statistics already show it. Creating your own courses based on what you know is a biggie, and I really am trying to push people into creating a course based on their own experiences. There are tons of people out there that want to buy that stuff and learn offhand. It's the way that the world is kind of moving. So I really am a big believer in that. Okay, awesome. Can you tell me about a specific moment that set you on the path you're on now? I know you spoke about the acromegaly and that, but what made you actually turn that into a podcast and a business? And there was actually one moment I think that probably defines it. So I was, so one of the things I think by nature, I'm kind of high strung a little bit. I've always kind of maybe been that way. I don't know, high strung is the right word. I get a little fine tuned, if you know what I'm saying. And I have to take testosterone shots. So again, I'm getting all this stuff for free that most guys want. I got to get it just to get the break even, but it can really get you going 100 miles an hour mentally and kind of screw with you. And so I was at the doctor right before I got finally said, screw it, I'm going to do all this. And I had to go in because I had really bad stress, and it was causing my stomach from my real job. I have a full-time job too. And it was causing stress, and it was my stomach was creating this acid. It was coming to my throat. I thought I had some type of throat cancer, quite honestly. It was really freaking me out. And the doctor said, well, you really just have this stress is creating this issue. And she's like, have you thought about ever going on an anxiety medication? And you have to understand, I'm on all kinds of drugs for my stuff. When you lose your pituitary gland, you're a walking pharmacy. I have to get shots every 2 weeks. It's just ridiculous. And it's not for me. She's like, well, you should just try it because it will just slow you down. And honestly, Curtis, within 3 or 4 weeks, I was in a state of mind I'd never been in. So that was the turning point. I'm not advocating for people to go get on anxiety medication. I think there's probably people on it who don't need to be on it, quite honestly. But for myself, who probably needed to be on it well before it, the best way I can answer your question is by finally balancing myself out. My creativity and my drive were going the same speed versus before one was going in reverse and one was going forward. I think I've always had the will and the want, but I couldn't get them on matched up. And that's really was the turning point for me.
I went through years of doing that, whether it was testosterone, cyponate, or an Athate, or different injections. And for one thing, those are some massive, that's not an insulin needle. It's not a fun shot you got to do, huh?
Oh my God. So let me tell you, so I'm on this growth hormone blocker, and it's called Sandostatin. They've recently changed the needle, but it was like you're giving a shot to a horse. I mean, it was so ridiculous. So oh my, yes. Like they're shooting peanut butter through it or something. It's ridiculous. So yeah, I mean, that's part of the process, but probably not a good visual for everybody either. I apologize in advance, but it's trial and error, and you got to be able to have the drive and creativity, but you also have to feel good about what you're doing. The other thing is I think for me is I finally felt comfortable in my own skin. That is so important. If you don't feel that way, that can just really be a really hard thing to deal with.
Well, and one of the things you're doing that I've seen with your podcast and the different stuff like that forces you to become comfortable in your skin as you're walking around, getting on video, things like that.
Oh my God, it's such a good point. So I had never been on social media at all. I was on social media for like 7 days in 2007 or 2008, honestly, and just didn't do it. And yeah, I went from hiding from everything to like throwing myself out. Really, I mean, from one extreme to the next. And that's what I mean. I think I just kind of felt balanced out. And you know what the funny thing is? Nobody cared because I'm not a big deal. Like you make this stuff up in your head. Yeah. I sent all these pictures out of myself. I thought I looked ridiculous. You know what happened? Nothing. Nobody cared. Yeah. And so that's the thing, and that's the point. And you're right. And it took me a little bit to get used to doing this, and my voice now it's like I don't think I've ever really been afraid to get up and talking in front of people. And that's the next phase of what I do is really speaking. I really love that stuff. I love to get animated and tell some of these ridiculous stories that went on with these surgeries. And it's fun. I mean, it's trying to get people to get out of their shell too, Curtis, is really the key thing. I'm lucky enough to be with you, and I've been with you on some other meetings, and I just feel like this whole community of entrepreneurs and what people are doing, it's like this whole new world that I never even knew existed. People want to see people succeed and help and share, and it's cool to be part of that.
Yeah, that's right. And you're a great storyteller. You've got me giggling at all kinds of stuff that I shouldn't be laughing at.
Well, that's right. That's the point. Yeah. No, but I think that's the thing, and there's, you and I both know there's people out there who just horrific thing. I interviewed Bobby Henline. Go out and Google Bobby if you've heard this. His self-title, not mine, the well-done comedian, because he had 40% of his body burned in a blast in Iraq. The guy has the greatest sense of humor, and he completely, his body was just tortured. So you got to be able to make fun of it, and you got to be able to do it. And when you figure those things out, I'm telling you, like a whole new world opens up. And I know it's easier said than done. And I can be more vain than anybody. Man, you got to learn how to get through it. It's the same thing with social media. Okay. Like social media is this huge ball, and it's just rolling, and people are new like myself. Yeah, no, I'm going to do it this way and this way. Not so much. And it just kicks you out of the way. You got to get behind it and ride the coattails of it. And that's the same thing with all this adversity stuff. So,
okay. So if you could recommend one book for our audience, what would that be?
Oh man, that's a great question. Why'd you have to ask me that right now? I'm reading, well, I just bought yesterday Persuasion, so I want to say that's the one. I can't remember who the author is on that one. Boy, I can't remember what I put my show notes on this. I've read,
You'd mentioned The Tattooist of Auschwitz before.
Oh gosh, yeah. What am I talking about? Yeah, that's a fantastic book. So if you're not familiar, it's about it's a true story. It's based on obviously the concentration camps of World War II, or one of them specifically Auschwitz, which I suppose probably means all of them. Just amazing story about this individual who it ends up getting picked to be the person who tattoos the numbers on the individuals when they bring him in off the train. And just amazing how he is able to keep himself going through all of it. And I won't give too much away. I really don't see how this does not get made into a movie. It's just an unbelievable story. Very horrific. The way that the Nazis thought and the abuse, and of course everybody knows how bad it was, but how they detailed the book's pretty amazing, because he's able to manipulate some of the guards, and they don't even realize he's doing it. And I imagine there was others who were, when they were in those camps, were able to do those. I think it's a great story to summarize of how when you put your mind to something and you are forced to really overcome, you can. You just may have to try things that you haven't tried before, which is very kind of similar to the people we bring on. Yeah, fantastic book.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. I haven't checked that out. In the last number of years, I think I've read one book that wasn't a self-help book or a personal development book, but that'd be a good
thing. I'm flawed here. I cannot get into reading self-help books all the time. Like, I know I need to. If anybody needs to, what I really love to do is read. I really encourage people to read biographies too. I think that, just because, and I'm big on history stuff, I think when you read biographies, first of all, or autobiographies, whatever, you can, you just get a perspective on what other people were doing, or what they did to succeed, or how they got through their issues. Even if it was 100 years ago, a lot of the same principles are still there. I mean, or leadership. If you're a good leader 90 years ago, you would probably still be a good leader today. If you look at Thomas Edison, the things he was doing in late 1800s, early 1900s. I mean, so I just, you can't go wrong, really, I guess what I'm saying, by reading really anything, quite honestly, if it's going to help educate you. So the other thing, Curtis, I'll tell people too, is I don't know how big your audience is into music, but one of the things I really am I love music, and I've started to try to learn how to play the guitar. I have tried to start to learn how to play the guitar. I really am fascinated, love it. We actually are bringing on some people early this year to talk about music therapy. I'm a big believer in that type of thing, and art therapy too. I don't mean to get off on a tangent, but you know what I found with reading books on musicians? Different mindset and interesting point of view on things and how they looked at stuff, hyper focused. And so I really encourage that as well.
Okay, cool. What character traits do you value the most?
I value people who aren't afraid to try new things, who aren't afraid to fail. I think that's an easy kind of cop-out answer, because certainly people don't want to lose all their money, and they don't want to, be in a life or death situation. But people who aren't afraid to throw themselves out there for something they believe in. I didn't know when I started this podcast if anybody would download it. You're hoping you do. I knew my mom was going to, my wife would, but other than that, how do you know? And it just started again. And it turns out, again, I didn't have a whole lot of family members who were even downloading. I don't know what that says about my family, but so it means people are out there listening. But yeah, I like people who aren't afraid and people who are intelligent. I've been that way my entire life. Who are intelligent yet humble, and when you talk to them, you clearly know like this individual is the real deal. A lot of that's God-given. But a lot of people work hard at being articulate as well. And you don't have to be the greatest speaker to be the most intelligent person. But I like when you hear somebody talk and they're very well spoken.
And that's one thing. Myself, I am a terrible speaker. I'm doing Toastmasters and different things, trying to trying to learn to become a better speaker. I've spoke at different events, Caesar's Palace and different things.
Yeah.
But I would not call myself a speaker. But talking about intelligent people, one of the things that people, a lot of times when I'm speaking to them, they say, well, I'm not that smart. Or, a lot of folks are more intelligent than me or whatever. So I'm choosing to do nothing with my life because I wasn't given that natural.
Exactly.
But the thing that, I'm definitely not the smartest guy around, but on average, if it doesn't matter what you're studying, if you start reading or listening to podcasts or audiobooks or whatever, if every spare minute that you've got is focused on late reading the books or whatever, then you will become a whole lot more intelligent than the guy that's got that God-given gift that doesn't exercise it. So
totally agree. I mean, that's a great point. And I think that, a great example that I didn't know anything about social media at like zero. It's putting the time in and the study in. And I'm that's a great point you brought up when you talk to somebody and they say, I'm not as intelligent. I don't think like that. I think, okay, this individual smart as hell. I got to get behind them and figure out how do I manipulate the situation so that I can learn from what they're doing. And I don't mean manipulate in a bad way.
Studying their methods. And
I am a huge advocate of time management. And like, I get the one thing that drives me nuts, Curtis, is I cannot stand it when I waste my time. It drives me bonkers, right? And I don't have like the three businesses, but like especially as you get older, it's like, that's what you got. Like, I don't know if people, I cannot imagine sitting on the couch and watching TV all day on Sunday or Saturday. There's just no way. Those are like two of the most valuable days out of the year that nobody uses. If you think about it, you get 104 of those days a year. The time though people sit and do nothing is crazy. And I think what intelligent people do or smart people do or leaders try to do is they use that time to their advantage. So I think where I was going with that is being intelligent is a lot more than just being able to recite everything out of a book or knowing chemistry. It's those types of things.
And the funny thing about that is people who do sit around on Saturday and Sunday or after they get off work and sit around and watch Netflix or whatever,
right,
are always the people that later are commenting on folks that are out, doing the work and putting in. They're always the one that are criticized and say, it must be nice.
That's right. That's right.
Like, no, that guy gave up years of his life having no life in order to be in the position they're in now. And nobody just wakes up successful, or the majority, unless you're
totally
or something.
Well, we were talking about this earlier when we were on my podcast, and you're talking about, I was doing all this, but nobody knew I was doing these 5,000 things behind it and working my rear end off. And that's the point of it. I'm with you. And I think that stuff's hilarious to me. I don't know if you're like this, but it's like I let all that crap in one ear, not the other. And like you've got way too much time on your hand. Like that's why I always see when some people, get so flustered and inundated with stuff that's going on that they have no control over. Like, who cares? They took that energy and put it into something constructive. Like they would be dangerous, But I realize that's not how it's going to be. And I am not perfect by any means. That's not what I mean. Certainly, I'm my own worst enemy, but I do think you can get you can get out of your wheelhouse on what you really should be doing, and real easy. So
one of the things I love is seeing people who have you've absolutely maximized something that could have been an affliction.
Yeah.
That's something I really admire about you in particular is you've taken that and turned that into a platform and this whole other thing that's helping people rather than sitting around and feeling sorry for yourself.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And the one thing I'm very proud of about having this disease is I complained, but I didn't necessarily want to be present in a lot of stuff. But it's funny, using this to my advantage now. Do you know how many things you can come up with, like giant or big hit? It's endless. So when you speak and you talk about these the adjectives you can use, which is all part of your presentation. And I appreciate you saying it. It's weird, Curtis, because I I get to interview all these people on my podcast, and almost all of them at the end say, I went through this horrific thing, but I wouldn't change it for anything because what I get to do now.
Yeah.
And I think that's the coolest thing. And I feel the same way. It just took me longer to figure that out. But I think that's probably the case with most people, because they unlocked this thing that they would have never unlocked had they not gone through the incident. And that's really the adversity, but the adversity creates opportunity factor. And I just think there's a ton there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, I know you've dealt with a whole lot of crazy stuff. You're talking about some of the hospital stuff that sounds terrible, but how do you push through tough times?
Well, that's a great question. So, for myself, it's knowing that there's eventually an end game to it. And what you're going through now is going to help you down the road. You just don't know how it's going to help you yet. And, I try to stay as positive as possible. One of the things I do that I think really helps me now is I still try to make fitness a big deal for myself, and it's not anywhere near what it used to be. In fact, I use resistance bands for the most part, and I like to wear myself out. I think when you are able to wear yourself out mentally, it helps you prepare for those tough times. So there's kind of a lot of stuff that kind of goes into it. It's fitness. It's we have a fitness app called Resistance Assistance Fitness Made Easy, and it's putting that it's constantly trying to be creative and push yourself to learn new things. When you get into a tough situation, and then we were talking about this earlier, problem solving. Yeah, I can figure it out. I can tell you this: learn how to be an entrepreneur on the fly, reading, watching things online, doing all these things. Isn't anything you'll ever get out of a book or a class. And it just prepares you to do other things well, and it prepares you to get through tougher situations easier.
Cool, I love that. What inspires you? I know we talked about that before, but
what inspires somebody who can make ClickFunnels work? No, I'm just kidding. That drives me nuts. I think somebody who's doing what they love full time. You do. I mean, you're doing what you appear to love, on a full-time basis. And that's what I want to be doing. I want to be able to get to a position where I'm successful enough where I can help others on a greater level. I think there's a lot of people out there who need help. Obviously, I'd love to be able to create a forum to where I can hold massive conferences of stuff that's all revealing healing and help people who are visually impaired, who can't hear. I hate watching the videos on YouTube where you see somebody hearing for the first time when they're 25. It's not that I hate seeing that person. I just hate seeing that somebody's had to go that long. So that's really what inspires me to try to help others. People suffer through their own doing, and that's, one thing. But there's a whole bunch of people who suffer because they just weren't lucky. And any way you can try to help those people, I think when you're into that point where you're doing that is the most self-fulfilling thing you can do, in my personal opinion.
Okay. I love that answer too. Now, as you'll run into this a whole lot more as your podcast explodes and when you start speaking and stuff.
Oh man, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah.
Like I said, I can tell that's going to be a huge thing for you, and I hope you keep pursuing the speaking and the different things you're working on. How do you prioritize opportunities?
Well, that's a great question. So I have it narrowed to first what's going to help me the most financially, so that I can continue the machine moving. So the number one priority for me is speaking gigs, because I really feel like speaking could be a full-time thing for me. Just because, for one, the way I was diagnosed was through a dentist and some other dentists. Really weird. It's a whole story in itself, because of what happens to your mouth and your teeth with the disease acromegalia. Turns out dental associations and dentist offices are kind of a huge open market for speaking. And so I really think that all dentists should learn about this disease as they're going to school. So how I prioritize things right now, Curtis, is based on what's going to help me the most financially to continue the machine moving along. And that's really it. So it goes speaking, podcasts, speaking, fitness app, podcast, and then Adversity University. All of them are important. I put as much time into all of them as I can, but I'm willing to put a podcast interview on hold to take a speaking gig right now, because that's the most important thing. I'll get paid for that. And so that's kind of how I'm prioritizing the entrepreneurial stuff. Personally, what can help me be the most successful? That's what I'm talking about, trying to learn how to play guitar. I learned how to play chess last year. I want to learn the Rubik's Cube. I want to learn how to dominate a Rubik's Cube. Brought this whole method to figure out on you, got that. I want to learn how to do that. So those types of things, I think when you push yourself to learn those types of things, it helps on this other platform. So I try to take any opportunity I can to, when I'm speaking, to think about what I'm saying, cut out the the posture of the animation, and all those types of things. So it's a constant thing. It's a full-time thing. I'm the world's most important entrepreneur who has made the least amount of money, Curtis. How about that? How does that sound? So, but 2020 is going to be a big one. So it's, you know, how it goes. It takes you a while to get in the game and figure things out. So.
Okay. I've got one more question for you.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to your 18-year-old self if you could go back?
Oh, man. Read more. I think simple answer, short answer, read more. I was a terrible reader up until the last few years ago. And by terrible reader, I just didn't read. I was too focused on doing other things, drinking I'm not an alcoholic, but you know, I was too focused on the wrong things. So my 18-year-old self, I would really push myself to read more, and I would really push myself more to do more, and not get so caught up in what other 18-year-olds are doing. And it probably sounds like a cliche, but I just think the world we live in, even in 1994, that's when I was 18, you know, there was a lot of opportunity, and I wasn't going where I needed to go, which ultimately is why I basically had to go into the military. I went into the military, but in today's world, you know, with all of the opportunities that are out there through social media and just technology, it's endless on what you can do. The career path of somebody, you know, I work in my real job. I'm involved in employment and workforce, and you can spend a lot of money going to college and not get a whole lot out of it, or go into a completely different field. I'm a big believer in learning things on your own, and that is probably the second thing I would have done when I was 18. I mean, reading's one part of it, but really pushing myself to do these other things to be as mentally strong as I could be.
Cool, man. I love that. I'd agree completely that I'm one of the ones that went to college, got a degree,
yeah,
and have never used it. You know, it was good to put myself through the forcing myself to go to that next step.
Yeah.
I've learned more. I would say the majority of each book I read that I read each month. I mean, I learn more in a book, in a single book.
Sure.
That can be turned into a monetization, you know, turn into a
something
that produces profit. I'll learn more in a book that takes a couple days to read than I did in my entire college career there. So
absolutely, and I'm the same way. You know, I went to school for business management after I got out of the Navy, and you know, unfortunately, you don't learn how to be a manager in college. You learn that on the job. So that's a whole nother podcast for a whole nother discussion. But I think for any 18-year-old out there now, or even anyone, you know, we put so much emphasis on getting that degree, but there are other ways that you can self-educate yourself and be the most successful person out there. So,
I love that, man. Thanks again so much for your time, and
yeah,
I sure appreciate you. Is the best way to get a hold of you if people are looking to schedule interviews or be on your podcast, is that ryanwest.live?
Yeah, yep. Go to it, or you can email me at info@ryanwest.live, or go to the website and you can sign up right through there. ryanwest.live. That's correct.
Sounds good. I'll put a link to that in your show notes. I've got ryanwest.live/podcast as your podcast episodes.
That's it.
I'll put a link there on your show notes for you.
Okay, man. Hey, I appreciate coming on your show, Curtis. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. See ya.